Now I'm going to play through this footage and make a few edits as I use the keyboard shortcuts. And also pay attention to the fact that the audio is consistent no matter which track we switch to, and that is because I have this audio track soloed out. But when you switch cameras, you're only switching clips on the video track here where we have multi-camera enabled. The audio remains separate. This, of course, would change if I decided to use multi-camera audio follows video. But we're not going to do that. We're going to just keep it on this single track here. Okay, so I'm going to press spacebar and start playing the footage, and you'll notice when I make my first camera switch that the recording will be enabled and the recording won't stop until I actually stop the footage.
I would just click this little T down here, and you'll notice the text style is created.
So now recording is enabled.
Likewise, if I wanted to use this triangle graphic, for whatever reason, you can add this to the Creative Cloud library. Again, you can click this button, but you can also drag and drop. And that's now added to the graphics section.
So I was keeping the camera 4 angle active, which is the screen capture, because most of what the presenter was talking about was what was on the computer screen. And so on this part, I want our final edit to be showing the screen because, again, all the action is taking place there. I noticed that I didn't do it quite fast enough to catch him moving something on the screen, and I want to correct that. And if I was to move this back to before I cut, you'll notice that the cameras are switching automatically. So I'm just going to play this footage back now, but without touching the keyboard shortcuts. I'm not going to switch cameras, but pay attention, since I've done this previously, you can see in the timeline as the cuts change, the camera angles are going to change.
So I have some buttons down here towards the bottom. This is how you can add a graphic element. This is how you can add a text style, and this is how you could add a color. So in this case, let's say I wanted to grab this text style that I'm using for this heading. I would just click this little T down here, and you'll notice the text style is created. Likewise, if I wanted to use this triangle graphic, for whatever reason, you can add this to the Creative Cloud library. Again, you can click this button, but you can also drag and drop. And that's now added to the graphics section.
Now, I don't like this last cut I made here. I actually want camera 4, which you can see right here, to come in a little sooner when I cut away from camera 2. I want this to happen sooner. Now, we could do this a number of ways. One of the obvious is I can switch to the rolling edit tool by using the N shortcut, and I can just drag this back a bit. And then I can play it back and see if I'm happy with the cut.
Also, drag and drop.
And that's pretty close to what I'm looking for. That kind of change is okay, but let's say I'm not happy with this whole section. I just want to redo an entire minute of recorded edits. Well, we can do that. We can essentially record over what we've already done. So I can bring the playhead back here and go back into my program monitor and start recording my edits again. Now remember, if I start playing the footage, it's going to keep playing back those cuts because they're already recorded.
Bottom, this is how you can add a graphic element, this is how you can add a text style, and this is how you could add a color. So
now let's say that as I'm redoing this, I don't want it to switch. Remember, I'm hypothetically not happy with these cuts. So say that I want that piece of footage, multi-camera 3, to continue all the way up until this point, but I already have this cut here. So to keep this camera 3 clip going longer past here, we need to reactivate the recording before the playhead passes over this cut that's already here. And the best way to do that would be to start the footage using the spacebar and then press the 3 key since we're trying to activate camera 3. Once we do that, it will record over that cut. So let's try it.
Down here towards the bottom, this is how you can add a graphic element, this is how you can add a text style, and this is how you could add a color. So
now what just happened is I activated the recording by pressing camera 3 as it was playing back. even though it was already on camera 3, it wasn't recording my actions. Not until the frame around this camera turned red. Now, when I stopped the recording, it's showing me the result of my recorded actions. And what it ended up doing was it made a cut right where I pressed camera 3, and then it completely eliminated the camera 2 clip that was here previously. If I hit Command Z to undo, you can see the difference. Here is where the original cut was between camera 3 and then it switched to camera 2. But once I did the recording and recorded over that, it completely overwrote that cut and it made a new cut even though we were staying on the same camera. It's just kind of how this works. But at the same time, it also completely overwrote the fact that there was a camera 2 clip here. So say I wanted camera 2 to cut back in here, I would drag this playhead back a bit and I wouldn't press the camera 2 button until I wanted it to happen, maybe somewhere around this point in the timeline. So I'm going to use the spacebar to press play, and then when I want it to cut to camera 2, it will start recording and also make that cut.
A graphic element, this is how you can add a text style, and this is how you could add a color. So in this case, let's say I wanted to grab this.
And there we go, we've made our cut. So that was kind of a roundabout way of making that switch, when you could use something like the rolling tool to just kind of shift your cut. Now, I personally find it a little easier to just stay in this program monitor almost the entire time I'm doing a multi-camera edit. It's easy to get a little mixed up as you're going back and forth between the timeline and up here. You're kind of paying attention to two different versions of the same thing, and you're better off staying in one or the other. And clearly, since all the visuals are up here, it's much better to just stay up here. So let's play through and edit another cut, but let's just keep it completely in this program monitor. So I'm going to start playing the footage, and we're just going to watch what happens since I've already made some cuts.
So in this case, let's say I wanted to grab this text style that I'm using for this heading. I would just click this little T down here, and you'll notice the text style is created. Likewise, if I wanted to use this triangle graphic, for whatever reason, you can add this to the Creative Cloud library. Again, you can click this button.
Now, make note, all those switches that were just happening, that was not me. I was not using the keyboard shortcuts to make those switches. This can be confirmed by the fact that every time the camera switched, this remained yellow. That's not what happens when you manually make camera switches. We know that when I actually press the keyboard shortcut, it's going to turn red, and it means it's recording the cuts. And it also means that all the previous cuts I made are being overwritten. So we did just see in the last 30 seconds or so all those cuts happen. But now let's look what happens when I deliberately choose an angle. You'll notice that none of those cuts happen anymore, and I'm basically overwriting all of those cuts. So I'm going to play, and then I'm going to choose an angle, and pay attention to the red frame.
File that I'm using for this heading. I would just click this little T down here, and you'll notice the text style is created. Likewise, if I wanted to use this triangle graphic, for whatever reason, you can add this to the Creative Cloud library. Again, you can click this button, but you can also drag and drop.
You'll notice that that time around, all the camera switches we saw happening before didn't happen. That's because I deliberately chose camera 1 by pressing the shortcut key number 1. Now I can either be happy with that choice, or at any time I can drag back in the timeline and just redo my cuts altogether. This is what I mean by staying within the program monitor instead of looking at your cuts down here. It just makes more sense to play back the footage, confirm that you like the cuts you made, and then continue editing, but staying in the program monitor the entire time.